The nature of law. In this short video, we're going to ask and attempt to answer some very fundamental questions about the law, including, what is law? When you hear the word law, you may imagine any one of a variety of different concepts or images. For example, when you hear the word law, you might think of judges and courtrooms. You might think back upon the last courtroom drama you watched in the form of a movie or a television program. When you hear the word law, you might think of lawyers, the people you go to for legal advice, or the people who represent you in the courtroom. When you hear the word law, you might think of compensation, money, people suing each other for tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even millions of dollars. When you hear the word law, you might think of the police, or prison, or criminals. You might think of politicians, or the legislation that politicians make when they gather together in Parliament. Or you might think of contracts. You might think of your employment contract, or your mobile phone contract, or any one of the many contracts that you make on a daily basis. The law means different things to different people. But what is it? Can we define the law? The question, what is law, is not an easy question to answer. It's actually a very deep and philosophical question. It's the type of question that philosophers, both Western and Eastern, tend to wrestle with whenever they try and answer some of the most fundamental questions about life or existence. What is life? Why are we here? Is there a God? What is law? Why do we have to obey it? So we're certainly not going to be able to come up with a true, correct definition of law, but we can come up with a practical, useful definition that will help us to start our journey through Australian business law. So let's have a go at defining law. Most people, when asked to explain what law is, will usually use the word rules somewhere in their definition. The law can be defined as a set of rules. Of course, not all rules are laws. The rules that tell us how fast we can drive on the road are laws. The rules of football or chess are not laws. The rules that tell us how we need to behave when we, for example, go into a shop. The rules that tell us that we can't simply take what we want, that we have to pay for things with the permission of the shop owner. These rules are laws. The rule that if you're not home by 7 o'clock tonight, you should call your mother and tell her where you'll be is not a law. So what is the difference between a legal and a non-legal rule? The answer is the source of the rule. Who made it? If the rule was made by your parents or by a football association, the rules are not laws. But if the rules were made by the state, they're laws. Here we're using the word state as equivalent to the word government. So the law can be defined as a set of rules made by the state. The third element of our definition sets out the consequences of breaking these rules. There are two types of possible consequence, depending on the type of legal rule. We can divide the law into civil law and criminal law, and we will be exploring this difference in later topics. Civil law is concerned with the relationship between citizens. If I have a contract with you and I fail to do what I promised to do, if I break the contract, then you would turn to civil law for a remedy. You may be able to sue me for compensation. That process is known as litigation. Criminal law is concerned with the relationship between the citizen and the state and sets out the rules that every citizen must obey in order to be seen to be behaving appropriately and fairly. If I break the criminal law by perhaps assaulting another person, The victim will not necessarily sue me for compensation, although they could, and that would be under civil law. But if the assault was serious, I may be prosecuted by the state, charged with a crime, and if found guilty, punished for my actions. That process is known as prosecution. So those are the two main types of consequence for breaching a legal rule. If I breach a legal rule that's part of the civil law, I could be subjected to litigation and sued by the person that I've hurt. If I break a rule that forms part of the criminal law, I could be prosecuted, charged with having committed a crime, and if found guilty, punished. So there's our simple, practical definition of the law: a set of rules made by the state and enforceable by prosecution or litigation. This is a far from complete definition of the law. You might ask, what about the concept of justice? What about ethics, morality, right and wrong? What about the role of politicians? We'll explore the relationship between law, justice, ethics, and politics a little later. Why do we have law? What is the purpose of law? The law serves many purposes. For a start, the law is a way for us to resolve disputes. It's a fact of life that we often find ourselves disagreeing with and entering into disputes with the people around us, whether it's our friends, family members, neighbours, strangers, people with whom we do business, employers and employees. Most of the time we can resolve our disputes by ourselves. We talk them through, we sort it out. But sometimes, no matter how much we talk it over, we simply cannot resolve the dispute. The law provides us with a mechanism for resolving the disputes that we cannot resolve ourselves. We could each engage lawyers who advise us about the law, and that may help us to resolve the dispute. And if our lawyers won't agree, then perhaps we can go to court and resolve the matter before a judge. The law maintains social order. One can imagine what life would be like without legal rules that tell people how they can and cannot behave. The law preserves and enforces community values. A community believes that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and that people should behave accordingly, and the law provides a structure, a foundation to ensure that every member of the community complies with the community's values. The law protects the disadvantaged. There are people within our community, for whatever reason, who have less opportunities or less abilities than other people, and the law is there to ensure that those people are treated fairly and appropriately. We have, for example, laws that prohibit discrimination on the grounds of gender, or race, or age, or mental or physical disability. The law plays an important role in regulating the economy. When a government wants to adjust some aspect of the economic system, they will often use laws in order to make those changes. There are many laws that have very dramatic economic consequences. For example, when a government makes changes to the industrial relations laws, there are inevitably important economic consequences of those changes. And finally, the law exists to prevent the misuse of power. Within liberal democracies such as Australia, legal systems and lawmakers seek to abide by what is known as the rule of law. We obey the law, not individuals and personalities, and the law applies equally to everyone, from the highest to the lowest. The law exists to prevent the people who are in positions of influence from misusing their position. What does the law regulate? There are many, many aspects of our lives today that are regulated by law. On the screen are just some of the categories and subcategories of law. We won't go into detail in relation to each of these subcategories. We'll let you read about those at your own pace. But we will, in this subject, business law, be touching upon each and every one of these subcategories of law. Our final fundamental question is, why does the law keep changing? And as we will see, the law does indeed change. Some areas change more quickly than others, but change is inevitable. Why? Again, there are many reasons why the law changes. One reason is political change. Different governments and different political parties have different ideas about the way the community should be regulated. We may have an election, which results in a change of government, and the new government seeks to implement its policies and its ideas by changing the old law. For example, a new government may have certain ideas about how higher education should be regulated, and once in power, the new government will set about passing new laws that will change the old laws and make those changes to higher education. The law is not perfect. Sometimes there are problems with the law that need to be fixed. Sometimes the law doesn't work the way it was intended to work, and so the law needs to be changed in order to fix those problems. We said earlier that the law reflects community values, but community values themselves change. What people believe to be right and wrong changes over time. And the law, if it is to reflect community values, must change in accordance with those values. Behavior that was seen as objectionable in the past may longer be seen as objectionable, and a law that prohibited that behavior may be changed to allow it. The law may change as a result of pressure from lobby groups. Different groups with the community have different ideas about how the law should be set and how it should be changed. For example, groups of employers or groups of employees, groups of students or environmentalists may come together and put pressure on the government to make changes to the law. And finally, of course, the law changes because technology changes. With each new technology, new problems arise and new laws are required to address those problems. When the automobile was invented, there suddenly became a need for traffic laws. With the rising influence of information technology, one of the most rapidly changing areas of law at the moment is, of course, information technology law and intellectual property law. Every change in technology, again, creates new problems that need new legal solutions. All of these factors together contribute to an ever-changing law.